Two U.S. citizen children over the weekend were included in the deportation flight to Honduras of their mother. Everybody in this family were kicked out of the country, including two little kids, without the opportunity to speak to an attorney or to go through due process to be deported. One of the children kicked out of the country is a 4-year-old boy with stage 4 cancer, who now has no access to his medication. This is according to the National Immigration Project, as reported by the New York Times. An attorney for that organization, the National Immigration Project, an attorney named Gracie Willis, she told NBC News over the weekend that the boy and his 7-year-old sister were snatched by ICE on Thursday. They were then taken to El Paso, Texas, and then flown to Honduras first thing Friday morning. The 4-year-old boy, who was, up until these fucking Nazis seized him, the boy was actively receiving treatment for a rare form of cancer, and he was thrown out of the country without his medication. That's according to Gracie Willis at the National Immigration Project. Now, attorneys who heard about what was happening were preparing a habeas corpus petition when the children were deported on a charter flight put together by this fucking Nazi Tom Homan beast who heads ICE before the habeas petition could be filed with the court. An attorney who is representing this family, her name is Erin Hebert. She did not respond to multiple requests for comment. In a press release by the National Immigration Project, Hebert called the deportation of U.S. children illegal, unconstitutional, and immoral. Ms. Hebert added, quote, "The speed, brutality, and clandestine manner in which these children were deported is beyond unconscionable, and every official responsible for it should be held accountable." End quote. Now, Gracie Willis, the attorney who represents the Immigration Project, is representing a similar case involving the mother of a 2-year-old citizen, U.S. citizen, who was deported with her child on Friday. Look, I really feel like maybe I've been holding back, even though I use pretty vile language about what is happening in this country. But I've said this before, one of the most profound awakenings I had in my entire life was when I discovered what had happened during the Holocaust to the Jews in Germany and Eastern Europe. The wholesale butchery and slaughter of 6, 7, 8 million people. And how the films available online to depict what the Jews were forced to endure before they were butchered in the 100 different death camps in Germany and Poland and other countries. Those films will haunt me. I've said this before, will haunt me for the rest of my life. Those are images that you cannot unsee if you have seen them. You can't unsee them. I have seen the films, the fictional films, based on real-life characters like The Schindler's List, like the documentary Shoah, where survivors, and that film, Shoah, was made a few decades ago when there were still an abundance of people who survived Treblinka and Dachau and Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen and on and on and on. But in my confrontation with or discovery of the reality, including the books I've read, like the book Treblinka, the book Night. The images, visual and graphic and written, are stuck with me forever. And I am just a little tiny atom in the human race on this planet. My thoughts, my ideas, my pain, my this, my that are absolutely inconsequential to just about anything that occurs on this planet. But once again, when I heard the story of these children who are, in fact, American citizens, the Jews of Germany, the little kids there were German citizens. When I heard this story starting last Thursday about these children, who this fucking monster Trump and the beasts that operate around him were now snatching children. The only thing that flooded into my mind were those images of the little kids. Oh my God, the little kids walking down a barbed wire corridor in one of the death camps, maybe Auschwitz, and the little kids in front were pulling up the sleeves of their tattered, busted-up jackets, showing to the person taking the photos the tattooed numbers on their arms. And the children who were showing the numbers, of course, had no idea what was coming within hours, if not minutes, of that photograph being taken of them. But I know what happened. And those images, the reality, I understand that the Jews have had terrible shit laid on them for 2,000 years, if not longer. I understand. But I'm talking about in my lifetime, or close to it. No, I guess it was in my lifetime, wasn't it? And how horrifying everything that I have ever read or seen or heard about that particular horror that human beings visited upon one another, the Holocaust. Everything that I have taken in has completely altered the way I view these things, which is one of the reasons the slaughter in Ukraine, the slaughter in Gaza, the slaughter in India, all of it, just, I don't know. Sometimes, I don't know, do you feel this way? Sometimes I feel that my grip on reality is getting very, very slippery. Over the weekend, another 100 people in Gaza were blown to pieces by this dirty fucking Netanyahu. Just horrible shit that just continues. A U.S. district judge, regarding the case I'm talking about with the little kids, U.S. District Judge Terry Doughty ordered a hearing in the case, saying it appeared that the government deported a U.S. citizen, quote, with no meaningful due process, end quote. And, you know, it appeared, Judge, for fuck's sake. All these judges, why don't you stop mincing the goddamn words and setting up these hearings of yours 30 days, 60 days down the goddamn road? Do you realize what's happening in this country? Appeared that American citizens were deported without due process? Now, the arrest and deportation of these kids and their parents, these are just the latest in a whole bunch of cases that should be causing all of us to run screaming into the street, screaming in defiance that this shit's got to stop. All these headlines about U.S. citizens being, mistakenly detained by this beast fucker Tom Homan and his ICE Nazi stormtroopers. And in some cases, official paperwork incorrectly forcing them to leave the country. And then there was I didn't see it. I've seen clips from it this morning. This little blonde bitch who is the spokes geek for Trump, this Carolyn Leavitt, and the beast Homan had a joint press conference this morning where Homan stood there and more or less said, oh, quit your fucking bitching. We're getting rid of terrorists. Terrorists. Prison escapees, mental health escapees. Who's to say when a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 7-year-old is not a threat to this degenerating country? God damn it. And then you have Mahmoud Khalil, a U.S. permanent resident. His papers, so to speak, were in order. Detained by Homan's Nazis without a warrant. And Abrego Garcia, who was sent to El Salvador despite a court order barring his removal. When are these judges going to understand? These Trump Nazis do not give a shit what you order, what you say, what you determine. They don't care. So my question is a question I keep having. When is the last bastion of defense in this country going to rise up against this fucking monster Trump and all of the Nazis that work for him and say, okay, enough? When is that going to happen? And the only force in this country that has the power to do that, as some of these snotty bastards who work for Trump are very eager to tell you. Who was it that said, well, the Supreme Court doesn't have an army? Was that little Nazi Jew, Stephen Miller? Or no, I guess it was the dumpster dweller, Steve Bannon, who said that. The point he was making was, hey, we can do what the fuck we want. How are you going to enforce your rules, Supreme Court, or any judge? How are you going to enforce it? So what's left? In this country, the only thing left is the U.S. military. That's right. And understanding fully the absolute frozen chain of command idea that is baked into the Constitution and into every ranking military leader in this country ever, that the military is run by civilians, and the civilians make the determinations, the military carries out those determinations. But at some point, there's going to be a break with that. I honestly believe this, because I don't believe, as I'm sitting here this moment, I don't believe that the highest levels of the U.S. military are willing to do what the Trump pig and these monsters that work for him are in the process of doing, which is to say to the Constitution, fuck you. You are no longer relevant. Go away. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.